Hey everyone, welcome to another Grim Dawn skill video guide. Today we are looking at Forcewave. Forcewave is a starter soldier skill. It can be used as a sort of cooldown big swingy thing, or with its transmuter, a main attack. So Forcewave's text. Such force is channeled into the attack that it compresses the very air, projecting out a wave of energy that stuns and damages foes. This attack requires a shield or two-hand melee weapon. So Forcewave on its own, if we look here, is a wave of force. It shoots out in front of you in a 12-meter range. It deals either main hand damage if you have a two-hander, or it will deal offhand damage if you have a shield. The offhand damage on a shield is listed on the actual item. So Forcewave, it will deal, the main hand offhand damage, and it also deals physical damage of its own and stuns the target. It has two modifiers and a transmuter. The first modifier is Rending Force. Forcewave shatters enemy armor, making them more susceptible to physical attacks. This adds crit damage to the attack, increases the physical damage of the attack, and reduces the target's armor. This will allow you to more easily hit them with physical damage. It's pretty simple, honestly. The third part of the ability, the second modifier, is Internal Trauma. Forcewave shatters bones and ruptures organs, causing profuse internal and external bleeding. This adds on internal trauma damage and bleeding damage. So this takes Forcewave out of the purely physical realm and adds on bleed damage, adds on internal trauma damage. Internal trauma damage is kind of almost like an exclusive damage to the soldier. It's in the demo a little bit, but for the most part you're going to find it in the soldier tree. Like Illyrian's Rage increases internal trauma damage. Zohan's technique has internal trauma damage on it. Cadence has some internal trauma damage. And Blindside on Blitz has internal trauma damage. So it is kind of a soldiery thing for an ability to get internal trauma damage. And internal trauma damage is the dot damage associated to physical damage. I think it's reduced by physical resistance, and unlike bleed, it is gonna hurt everything. Internal trauma damage is like a bleed effect that affects everything in the game. Bleed, most undead are immune to it. I think the Obsidian Chthonics are immune to it as well, but internal trauma damage just cuts through all that. The lone transmuter on Tremor. With the Will of Maynard, smash the ground with a mighty two-hander, and let rip devastating waves of energy upon your foes. This technique requires a two-hand melee weapon. Tremor is not a default weapon attack enhancer, and cannot trigger effects such as Markovian's Advantage. So what this will do is, with a two-handed weapon, this will allow you to spam Force Waves. It reduces the energy cost immensely, removes the cooldown entirely, and removes the stun entirely, but it'll turn Forcewave into a spammable ability. Now, like the text says, you can't use it with things like Markovian's Advantage, Zohan's Technique, Brute Force, or any of the other abilities that sort of proc off of your basic weapon attacks, because you're not doing the basic weapon attack animation. You're sort of doing the slam attack and shooting Force Waves out. So, there are two ways to go about building Forcewave. One is using it as the on cooldown sort of haymaker stunner, and two is to use it as a spammable ability. Generally speaking, if you're doing a two-hand build with the soldier and you're looking for a main attack, Forcewave is certainly an option. If you're using a shield as your offhand, Forcewave is also an option, like what I have running with this character. So in that case, if you're running a shield and running Forcewave, shield training is a good in-class synergy for you, because you'll just add on raw physical damage to all of the attacks you make with Forcewave. Focusing heavily on the ability itself, Illyrian's Rage, as I mentioned before, is a great ability to pick up with it, because you'll add on some flat internal trauma damage to all of your attacks and increase your percent internal trauma damage, thus increasing the internal trauma portion of Forcewave. You can't use it with Zohan's Technique, unfortunately, even when you're spamming it, but if you're not doing the spamming version, you can use Zohan's Technique, because your basic attacks will still be basic attacks, and you can have this ability proc off of those, and use Forcewave in its cooldown mode. Warcry, as always, is a great ability just in general in the soldier tree, and I'd count it as a synergy with pretty much every ability that happens in every soldier combination. You could maybe build Cadence and then have Forcewave as a swinger, but generally speaking, people tend to use Forcewave more on its own. This build I have right here is kind of a weird one, and I'm still kind of testing Forcewave, kind of, but yeah. It's a couple little things in here for Forcewave. Obviously, Decorated Soldier increases the physical damage of the ability. Fighting Spirit always works. So yeah, jump over to the Shaman. You can't use Brute Force with it. Brute Force will only affect your... Or no, I'm sorry, you can use Brute Force with it. What you can't use is Feral Hunger. Feral Hunger and Upheaval are the two that you can't use. You can use Brute Force if you're using a two-hander to add the lightning damage on it and increase the physical damage you're dealing. This build is using Savagery right now as its main attack and Forcewave as part of its rotation, so you can obviously do that. Savagery will pick up whatever damages you're dealing because it's dealing main hand damage. Same thing with Forcewave. It does really pick up all your damage types that you can throw out that deal flat damage. I don't know if I'd recommend Forcewave and Primal Strike together. It's kind of a weird setup. You'd maybe be using one in its spammable form, and then turned around and have the other as its cooldown mode. But yeah, pretty much those are the things you'd shoot for, are maybe Brute Force, maybe Savagery. Like, if you're building a two-hand build in a Warder, though, I would recommend Primal Strike over Forcewave 90% of the time. And Primal Bond will affect Forcewave, so that's not a bad option because of the physical and bleed damage on it. So the other big Forcewave outclass synergies, to me, come from the Demolitionist. Temper gives you just percent internal trauma damage, percent physical and pierce damages, and armor. So it's all around really helpful for the character. You'd also go probably for improved casing on Canister Bomb because of the internal trauma damage, and it also deals piercing damage. And you've also got Shattering Blast, the new modifier for Granado. All about that internal trauma damage, also adds on pierce damage to the main attack. Canister Bomb, Granado are your physical pierce bombs from this class. So if you're doing a commando with Forcewave, it'd be kind of an interesting build. You'd probably want Canister Bomb with Concussive Bomb for like a stun heavy thing going on, and you just deal a lot of damage with it. And then you have Granado as a sort of single target giant chunk of health removal thing. And while you're using Forcewave, probably in its spammable form. Stunjacks with Full Spread also has internal trauma damage, but I don't think I'd recommend crossing Stunjacks with Forcewave, even if you're doing a Quick Jacks thing. I think that'd probably cover it, actually. Like, it'd be a fun build. If you were to take the Soldier all the way down to its end to pick up Illyrian's Rage, and then focused Forcewave with internal trauma, and then threw in Canister Bomb and Granado as your ancillary abilities, you could actually deal quite a bit of damage, I think. And a lot of it would be physical pierce and internal trauma, because Illyrian's Rage affects physical pierce, internal trauma, and Temper affects physical pierce, internal trauma, Forcewave is physical, internal trauma, and then the bombs are physical pierce, internal trauma. So yeah, that would be your main go-to things, I think, for a Forcewave commando. So speaking of Forcewave commandos, there is the Justicar's Vengeance set. It is a heavy Forcewave and Blitz based set. You end up with a whole lot of defensive abilities out of this. The helmet gives you a nice bit of additional physical damage and fire damage, which is going to cross with your damage types as a commando. You get more fire damage off the gloves and attack speed to help like spam your force waves. And the set gives you a lot of pluses to the ability. It's kind of the Forcewave set, I think. I don't have the whole thing, so I can't show the whole thing off. But yeah, that's the helmet. Those are the gloves. It actually looks really cool. The chest piece has like this long coat thing with armor. So, it's a pretty nice set, all told. So, for Devotion on Forcewave, you generally want to cross your damages up. So, Bull Rush actually would work pretty well with Forcewave. Getting that extra chunk of physical and internal trauma damage is pretty nice. There's also, I believe it's here, yeah, Maul. You could throw in Maul. Maul works with Forcewave. This is just another chance to stun, on top of dealing more main hand damage and physical damage. You can add in... where is it? So on block, if you're using a shield, you can get Targo's Hammer here, which will have this sort of, like, Paladins in Diablo 2 with the hammer swirling around them, only it doesn't expand. Like, you get these hammers swirling around you whenever you block. And this can actually mesh well with a heavily shield-based build. It's also within the damage types of Forcewave. Likewise, Trample. Sort of chance on block. You create a wave of force from your shield. And, yeah, similar things going on there with Trample. I believe, yes, Blind Fury. 100% chance on crit. You have this extra internal trauma damage, in addition to all the main hand and bleeding damages, so it meshes with the damage types of Forcewave and its internal trauma parts. Of course, Living Shadow does as well. You could also throw on Assassin's Mark. If I were doing that commando build, I'd probably shoot for Assassin's Mark, because you're dealing so much physical and pierce damage with your bombs and with Forcewave with the physical damage. That'd be a pretty good one. Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned Rend before for the bleed, and Hell of Mogdragon for the bleed, but I'd honestly not go for bleeding damage with the Forcewave build. I think Blade Arc is much more suited towards that. Oh, but also, the Shield Maiden. If you're using a shield with Forcewave, the Shield Maiden, I think, is your go-to just for a shield build. Like, you generally want to shoot for it, I think, above anything else if you're doing a shield heavy build. It also has this node where you get the internal trauma damage on it. I think that's pretty much it for Devotion. It's a very specific type of skill, and it's not actually a great procer for things, because if you're using it in the cooldown mode, though, I would recommend something like Bull Rush on it, because you'll get more chances of Bull Rush to proc off of it. I think same thing with Maul. It would up the chance of Maul happening. But yeah, for the most part, you're not really using it to proc Devotion abilities, but you could throw a couple, you can throw a Devotion ability on there if you really need to, or if it's an open ability for you to throw something on. But yeah, those are the two I'd go for putting an ability actually on the thing. Otherwise, it's pretty much stuff that would synergize with using a shield with it, for the most part. Alright, so that's going to cover Forcewave. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time for another Grim Dawn skill overview guide.